Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. To another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Dorota Ulkowska. Did I say that right?
You are so close. We're going to go with it. Yeah.
With Accurate Networks. You are based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. MSPs all over the world, and I can say that I very rarely get to talk to MSPs that are in Canada. It just seems like as many as there are, I don't get to talk to enough of them. But today we are going to talk about how cybersecurity impacts, that MSP selling process. You mentioned it. We can offer tools and services all day long, and I asked you the loaded question: what is like the one thing that kind of keeps you up at night, or gets to that level of frustration when working with a client? And I think you said it. It's the just tell me what is the minimum thing I have to do, but don't make me apply it everywhere in my organization. And oh, by the way, don't charge me an exorbitant amount of money because I don't have any money. Is that close?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. It's those clients who want to do the bare minimum, get their cybersecurity insurance, but really they don't have the time, the will, the money to do much about it. And they push back on the advice and the consultation that we have to keep them safe.
Yeah, and I think if I had this said to me before, we used to do, and I think you mentioned this earlier, doing quarterly business reviews, right? And I had had a boss once upon a time when I was with an MSSP, and they called them quarterly service reviews. And I asked why quarterly service versus quarterly business. And he's like, this is a review about our service delivery, not about sort of the business needs of like license up for renewal. So he's like, there's no financial decisions going to get made during these quarterly calls. And I said, oh yeah, because every time you schedule a meeting with a client, they're like, oh, here we go. They want to charge us more money. And I think that's starting to shift a little bit, but by and large, I get it. I remember being in those shoes. But to your point, it's you listed off a series of which probably is barely scratching the surface of excuses from a prospective client or existing client as to why they can't spend any more money, or they're not interested in investing any more time, resources into whatever it is that you might be giving them, free or otherwise.
Yes. So I would like to share a couple of random examples with you, which stuck with me. And I think you're going to see why. There's one client, a small organization, under 100 people, who, and this is an executive, who told me, look, this industry is not going to get any smaller. The cybersecurity industry is just going to keep on growing. Every year, you're going to come to me and say, you need X and Y and Z as a minimum to stay safe.
Right.
And so the amount I'm spending on IT to stay safe from, and as he put it, imaginary threats is a big aspect of my spend of my business. I'm a small business, and I simply choose not to buy into the fear factor.
Sure.
So I am going to do the following things. I think that's enough for me, and I'm not going to go any further.
Yeah.
A second example that I have is, again, a smaller organization, I would say about 70 people, and the executives bought into phishing campaigns, into user training, into MFA, but they themselves refused to do any of it.
Got it.
Because they felt they were beyond it. And of course, as we all know, the executives are, the main ways.
They're ripe for disruption, right?
Exactly. And lo and behold, in that particular situation, so this particular situation occurred in my previous employment, but one of the executives had a vulnerability directly with his personal bank and lost a ton of money and pointed the fingers at us. And
Sure.
it's it's one of those no-win situations where we as an MSP, our job is to advise. Our job is
Yeah.
to provide all of the information that the client needs in order to make the right business decisions and to stress the importance of the core basics to stay safe, the critical
The,
risks.
the cyber
But
hygiene, if you will.
yes, but if the client says, no, I'm not doing that, the only thing that we can do as an MSP is have them hopefully write something for us saying, yeah, we had this discussion and we decided not to do it. And then sit back and, obviously provide service as
Sure.
required. But you're not going to force a client to do something they are absolutely unwilling to do. And unfortunately, many small organizations feel that the very basics of what we MSPs consider that
Yeah.
cybersecurity hygiene it is not a requirement for them.
I think we could probably spend an entire episode talking about what to do when a client or a prospective client says no to particular services, indemnification or otherwise. The short version is when the bad thing happens, and it will happen, they go, but you didn't tell me that this scenario was going to play out, so it's still your fault, right? Like there's
Yes.
always going to be claim the victim, and we've seen, particularly in the States, a lot of examples where the fact that they were still doing business with that client, even though the client said no to a lot of the things that we were saying they needed to do, the client was like, when the bad thing happened, they're like, well, if I'd only known, and now I'm still holding you responsible. Or even going so far as to say the insurance company is saying, hey, we're seeing that even though the client was given the guidance, it wasn't clear enough, and so we're coming after the MSP. And I'll just leave
Yeah.
it at that because I think it's one of those things that again, it could be an entire episode or a series of episodes around, when to walk away type thing. But one of the things that you said that really struck a chord with me is the thing that we hear a lot is, well, I have insurance, and I don't believe that our leadership needs to do this because they're above it. They're not in the day to day, and that's why we have insurance, right? And so I have come up with this phrase, and it's not a very nice phrase, but I consider buying cybersecurity insurance is the investment into future failure of my decision-making process when I click on
Mm-hmm.
that link. And that might
Mm-hmm.
be trivializing it a little bit because we know it's a lot more than that. But the ability to continue operating after an incident has occurred can often be minimized by the number of proactive, preventative things we have in place. And then the reactive, I think you mentioned this before, like we're talking about offline, the security alarm. Like if the alarm goes off, we know we need to make a decision about something that is happening, and it basically says everybody needs to come to attention and figure out what that is. In this particular case, this is where I think most of our prospective clients fall flat on their faces, is that the things that were to provide them with the alarm system, to put the pieces in place to avoid the big problem. I mean, you think about like locking your car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not locking the car so that you don't break into it to steal the laptop sitting on the seat. I
Mm-hmm.
might as well just leave that car unlocked
Yeah.
because at least then I'm not paying for a window to be replaced when you take the laptop. We're really having the conversation of what inside that car shouldn't be there in the first place. And if
Exactly.
it's going to be in the car, where should I put it so that it's not an obvious opportunity to steal with car doors locked or not? Because even if the alarm system goes off, by the time we can respond to it, it's too late. And I think that's where, when you're putting all these opportunities in play for the prospective client to make a decision around how to improve their resilience in the threat actor space, is tied largely to, do we have the right alarm in place? And based on that alarm, when it does go off, do we have enough time to react and respond and remediate what is happening before it becomes, I'm now having to pay for insurance or business continuity recovery or business disruption recovery because it has, paralyzed my entire organization.
Paralyze your organization, and there is a high risk that the image of your organization in the marketplace is going to be impacted. And And there, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. Everybody listening to this podcast knows this. The risks are more than just downtime and financial.
Sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of the smaller organizations or the leaders or the decision makers, and I feel for them, I do, because they have to balance their spend, their budget,
Yeah.
and the potential of what could happen theoretically when a risk occurs.
Sure.
And they have to make the best call. And so I understand that this is not an easy decision to make. If you are an enterprise organization, this is a no-brainer. If you're an organization of 50 people, 100, 200 people, it becomes tougher. But the fact is that the basic tools for cybersecurity are not very expensive. What makes the biggest impact is the behavior of the people. And that is the
Yeah.
part that I'm tripping up on, right? Because I try to put myself in the shoes of those decision makers, and I'm looking at the money and the time. Absolutely, you have to balance that. But it really doesn't cost you much money or time to train everybody from the top to the bottom
Sure.
how to not click on that link,
Right.
how to not leave the laptop in the back of the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
It's the majority of the risks are due to human behavior, and yet this is the part that we are getting. Well, I'm seeing the biggest pushback on.
Yeah,
So what we
inevitably
need,
we are going to click, right? Inevitably,
yeah,
at some point, you and I will click on a link because we've been given enough information to create the illusion that there is trust in the email that is sitting before me. It
yeah,
might not be today, it might not be in 3 months, it might not be in 2 years. But I have noticed a pattern where I actually had an email not too long ago that I got lucky on because it had an attachment. So the email was asking me questions about doing a demo for a vendor that I had looked at recently on
mhm,
LinkedIn. And I got an email and I read the email and I'm like, this is exactly what I want. And so I said, yep, here's my Calendly link. Let's book 30 minutes.
let's do
I'd
this.
love to see the
Yeah,
demo. And the follow-up email said, hey, before we meet next week, I have attached one sheet that illustrates some of the services or products that we would like to talk to you about. And I noticed something weird about one, the PDF did not resemble a PDF. And then the header language, the domain didn't match the first email that I had gotten.
yeah.
So the first email was real from that person, or at least using that domain. Second one was not. And I'm like, I honestly, I got lucky. Something was weird about how that PDF looked, and I paused. But like, I can't imagine if I'd have been multitasking, and it could have just been easily I clicked on it.
But Chris, what you're describing is that behavioral training. Exactly. You're in
Right.
the industry. You knew something was different. You
Something
knew
was
at that
fishy.
point in time to pause, right? A lot
Yes.
of people who do not get this form of training, who don't have those basic tools, they won't have that instinct. And it is
Sure.
about us developing that instinct. And again, I hear clients say, well, you're trying to develop an instinct of fear in our employees. And my response is, well, not necessarily fear, it's awareness. It's
Yeah.
simply awareness, because unless we identify those little things that could be slightly off, it is so easy now to fool us.
Yeah, trust, trust but verify. I think there's even more of an element of crossing out trust and just saying verify. Like you mentioned this earlier about how some of the senior leadership with some of these organizations, and I would argue that when you say small organization, to me, in the States, we say that that's like 20 to 30 on the high end user count,
Okay.
not 70 to 100. And the reason I bring up the distinction isn't necessarily that the problems aren't the same. But I would argue that as you get above 5 to 10 employees, you get into that 20, 30 plus, and now you're getting up there 70 to 100. They probably have somebody that is responsible from a security officer standpoint, or at the very least should be, as the champion for some sort of security program that says, even if we're not training leadership, we're training those that, are likely going to click on this anyway. But the interesting part about phishing campaigns is, spear phishing campaigns, is that they, even if they're not targeting the leadership. They're using the leadership as the means to target the employee. And
Mm-hmm.
now with things like voice AI and voice replication of being able to mimic someone on the phone, we're starting to see a need to train against that. And I go back to what you said. It's not the the fear, uncertainty, doubt. It is, do you know it? Does this make sense that someone would that someone would do this, right? And the perfect example
Exactly.
would be, if I were to reach out to you and say, "Hey, I'm in a meeting right now. Do you have a minute?" Well, that already sounds weird. Why are you asking me if I
Mm-hmm.
have a minute while you're in a meeting?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see people go all the time and be like, "Yeah, I have a minute." Boom. Now they just verified that
Yeah.
they got the right person.
Look, I have a perfect example of exactly what you're describing, and that is I was in a meeting with my leader, and while I was in the meeting with my leader, I received a text from her saying, "Hi, it's Benta. Do you have a moment?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Benta, are you texting me?" She's like, "No." And I'm thinking, well, okay. So first of all, how does that person, I mean, getting my mobile number is easy enough, but how, they had to connect that this is my direct leader, that this, it was just crazy. And I thought, wow, if you are not aware, if
Yep.
you're, if you are just trusting that this is normal behavior and you don't know how to question something, you're going to get caught immediately. And again, the people listening to this podcast, they know all of this, but our clients can
Don't.
continue to resist that basic concept, no matter how many examples we have.
And
And
even the one you gave, I've seen examples where they still responded to the text.
yes, yes. Yes, because it is our natural instinct to have human connections. We've been trained over how many years to react in certain ways. So
Yeah.
to retrain that muscle, shall we say, it
Yeah.
takes practice. It takes repetitive, boring practice. Uh,
Which, well, it's interesting you say that. So I don't know if you have kids. My kids are late teens, early 20s. And it's interesting. I can send a text to one of my kids and not get a response for 2 or 3 days, or unless I actually asked a question, like it wasn't
yes.
like I might not get a response. And I was thinking about that in the context of what we're dealing with. The generations that are coming up into the workforce, they're not as inclined to click on
Hmm.
a link
Yeah.
or to try and respond to something unless they genuinely care about it. So our current threat landscape is running out of the urgency as the
Yes.
new generation's coming up, because they're like, I don't really care how urgent you think this is. You texted me, right? Like
Yes.
there's an email. Oh yeah, I checked that last week. Like, what do you
Yes.
mean you checked it last week? You've got 3 outstanding, parking tickets that are getting penalties attached to them. Like, oh yeah, I haven't read my email in like 4 days.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, well, they forwarded it to me because they're concerned that you're not responding. And I think that might be in our favor. There's
It
maybe some
well,
silver lining here.
Well, so I love your example for so many reasons, because I have two adult children, and same thing. I can text them and be like, okay, give me thumbs up just to know that you're alive. But
Yep.
yeah, but eventually, like we said, the cybersecurity industry is they're going to figure something else to catch those
Sure.
individuals who are not responding quickly to text. But to your point, the risk is our age group and older. And there are a lot of people in their 50s and
Sure.
60s, late 40s, who are definitely embedded in organizations and desperately need this training, desperately need this awareness, because they unfortunately are the risk.
They're fed by the drug that is the thumbs up or thumbs down, right?
You
The
got
Facebook
it.
notification, the why is there a link if
Exactly.
I'm not supposed to click on it? And to be
Exactly.
fair, what part of our world doesn't say click on the link? If it's underlined, you know it's clickable, which means you're already curious about where is it going to take me. And even if you're smart enough to look at it from a phishing perspective, after you've evaluated it, you might still click on it only to find out that it was not a malicious link, but it was a malicious email. And your
Yes.
response was to trigger them to do what comes next.
Yes. So my mother, who's 79 years old, she reaches out to me. Fortunately, if she is thinking, is this real or not?
Yep.
But there were a few instances where something was very clearly AI generated.
Sure.
And she asked me, she's like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know it's AI?
Right.
And I'm
Right.
like, well, mom, like it's obvious with regards to the imaging and this person has six thumbs or
Sure.
whatever else. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we already know, right? But my 79-year-old mother is like, I can't see these things. So now take
Sure.
that attitude and rewind it a little bit, or fast forward it, I should say, the younger generation will immediately know not to click on things, not to open something up. Whereas we're
Yep.
going, well, how would you know? But how would you know, Chris? And
Yeah.
that is the awareness. That is the training that is so desperately required. And again, I come back to the point that a lot of decision makers feel that they are beyond that until they're not, and then we as MSPs need to be ready to swoop in, save whatever we can,
Yeah.
and then at that point in time, push the basics of MFA and user
Right.
training.
So we've got a few minutes left, but we've had a lot of dialogue here that has gone back and forth between the target, which is the client prospects for the MSP, and that which is our, and talking about, people are the biggest threat to any challenge we face, and we keep touching on examples that are tied to our personal world, not necessarily our professional world. And
Mhm.
the thing that goes through my head when it comes to the personal side is thinking about things like banking. I don't
Mhm.
care who we know from ages of
Mhm.
80 to 10 that might have a potential bank account. They probably have to put a PIN code or some sort of additional level of authentication in, and they take responsibility and they don't complain about it. Or if they complain about it, it's just to let you know that they're complaining about it because it's an inconvenience, but they
Yeah.
still deal with it and do it. On the professional side, it's the exact opposite. Any of those things to enhance security are an inconvenience requiring inefficiency and taking away from my productivity. And then the second part to that is we also don't want to take responsibility for it because we have somebody in our organization that's their responsibility, not mine. And I wonder if part of our challenge in the space is reminding people when we talk to them about what we're trying to solve for in their business is that this is no different than the seatbelt laws and why you have insurance and why you lock your doors and why you have an alarm. To your point, we started with alarms that they would do in the personal side of their world, but are so quick to be resistant to do this in the business side of their world.
Yes, you've got it exactly how I'm looking at it. It's for me, as an MSP, all we can do is guide, provide consultation. At the end of the day, the client is making a decision that is best for them. So I really push the concept of that. And I think we spoke about this offline, but the example I gave is when you have a house alarm. All the
Yeah,
cybersecurity tools that we have, that's a house alarm. You know when
sure.
somebody is there, you know when somebody breaks in, you can call the police, whatever. But human behavior portion is not setting the alarm or leaving the window open
Right,
or leaving really expensive computers or whatever else, or a bunch of cash at the front window, right? That's
sure.
the human behavior portion. And we try to explain to our clients, we're trying to train you to
Yeah,
see that the open window is a risk and to identify that. And if the client still pushes back, we then explain to our clients, I respect your choice. This is your choice. This is your business. This is your direction. I am going to ask you for a confirmation in an email that we did discuss everything, that you
yeah,
understand the risks, and that you will not hold us liable if something occurs through behavior choices. At that point in time, we find that a lot of the clients pause because then they have to identify that, yes, they are going to take that risk on.
Yeah,
But some still go ahead with it and will still point a finger at us when something occurs.
of course.
But this is the seat that we have, right? We're
Yeah.
we're advisors. We can't force our clients to do something they don't want to do, and hence the frustration.
Well, and they say this. I mean, Phyllis Lee from CIS said, and I'm going to butcher this, but she basically said that when you're trying to satisfy a safeguard, MFA or whatever it might be, the means to satisfy it should not be more than the cost to remediate. So if the risk is higher than the cost to remediate, obviously it makes sense that you should
Hmm.
remediate that if you can. But if the risk is not as high as the cost, then you have to ask the question, should I actually remediate this? And I think in some cases there may be still the argument to it still should be done because you don't know what the
Hmm.
cost could be. You just have some of the information. So so yeah, I think that we all are taking on risks. You would go out of business really fast if you did not take on any risks. That would be kind of counterproductive to being in business. So yeah, I think we have pretty well hit on all of this, other than to like have a deep dive into know when to walk away. Um, that's
Yes.
a episode for another day.
Yes.
Last question, and I'm trying to do better at asking this question. Sometimes I forget. Is there one book that you might currently be reading or have read this year that you think is pertinent to those listening, or just pertinent to read?
Well, I have to say that there is a book, and I'm going to pull up the name of the author here. But there is a book called, and please listen to the whole thing before you judge. It's called Getting Naked, and it is by Patrick Lencioni,
Yep.
and it is getting called Getting Naked, a Business Fable, about shedding the three fears that sabotage client loyalty. It is a very easy read because it is very much told like a story,
Sure.
but it is focused very much on us in the sales area, showing our vulnerabilities
Yeah.
in order to be able to connect better with the client, but also to be able to support our clients' needs as well. Are you looking for that book on your shelf right
I
now,
was just
Chris?
looking to see if I have it. That is one I don't have. I have pretty much
Okay.
every book that he's ever written. I don't have
Oh,
that one.
really? Okay. Okay. So
So big fan. I will share my book that I'm reading right now. I am reading the book called Dark Wire. It's an investigative journalist perspective on the FBI Operation Trojan Shield, which is the FBI stands up in a sting operation, a fake company that sells encrypted phones that are basically a backdoor for all of the known underworld to basically provide, encrypted messaging that is all being decrypted and
yeah.
sent back to a centralized server. I bring this one up because it is a true story. It's not that old. It would go back maybe 5 years now, not even that long since it came out. But what's interesting is when we talk about privacy and security, this story written like a thriller gives a great glimpse at the things that we take for granted as far as our privacy and security. So yes, I get why they did this, and I'm not trying to undermine, the creativeness of what they did to bring down one of the largest criminal networks in the world. They were measuring cocaine not in grams but in tons, in metric tons. So that should give you an idea of what kind of level they brought down. But it's a reminder that when we think about our own security and the things that we're trying to do, just to our conversation today, sometimes those put at risk those that are innocent as a result of trying to solve for that which can be so big. So whether you're going to get into the getting naked and shedding the layers, or you want more of a thriller story, those are the two books for today. For those of you that have been listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.